Good morning. We're live in Zurich. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday with me, Tyler Brûlé. Coming up on today's program, Gorana, Grgić, our security correspondent, is here. Also, Florian Egli. I believe he might have taken the train from Munich. Maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, they're both here. Gorana, I'm going to start with you this morning. What have you spotted? What should we be talking about over the next 56 minutes?
Well, obviously nothing to do with the fallout from the Liberation Day and the various penguins that have been flooding our socials, but also really the reactions from countries all over the globe to the slew of tariffs that the Trump administration imposed. And then we also have various other stories from the judicial executive relations in various countries around the world. And a couple of more, I guess Florian can chime in here.
Florian, what have you spotted? Where do you want to go today?
Some light issues like free speech at universities, or I saw another one in the FT just now about decarbonizing the shipping industry, so we'll see if we get there.
We'll also be remembering our dear correspondent Gwen Robinson. We'll speak to Brenda Tuohy about watches and wonders. We'll also have a visitor from the fashion scene in New York. Also, John Lee is ahead as well on the Oxford debate in Zurich on China's influence in the technology sector. It's the 6th of April 2025, live from Zurich. This is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from Zurich, this is Monocle on Sunday with Tyler Brûlé.
And good morning from an absolutely stunning Zurich this morning. Very nice to sort of deliver a Sunday morning program like that, because it just feels from sort of the end of November, it's very rare that we're sort of not maybe addressing very low clouds and other things. Florian Egli is here this morning, of course, a regular voice on this program. I'm always sort of losing track of where you are, where you've been. How are you?
I'm very good, and I'm very glad to be here. I haven't been here for a while, and I'm here on such a beautiful weekend. It's pretty good timing, I would say. So yes, I took a train. Unfortunately, it stopped in St. Gallen as usual, train failure. So I had to get out and wait for another one.
Could we blame it on Deutsche Bahn, or could we blame it?
It's hard because it's an SBB train. But we would like to blame it.
We'd like to blame the Germans, of course. It's much easier. Anyway, also Gorana Grgić is here, our security correspondent, but also senior researcher with the Swiss and Euro-Atlantic security team at ETH here in Zurich and their security studies program. Very nice to see you. That is a long card, but it's not as long. Everyone were having a little bit of a laugh before we went on air, because we were talking about also some of the other interesting things you're doing in your day job, semiconductor resilience conferences. What do those look like?
Well, they're super interesting to us in the know, the nerds. No, I mean, we are dealing with a lot of very important things, because we know that chips power pretty much everything these days, from our microwaves and fridges all the way to, weapon systems. So we do need to talk about supply chain resilience and where Europe sits in that whole equation. And I'm sure that actually you will address some of these topics with the guest on the program at 10:30, John Lee, who can tell you a lot more about the semiconductor wars and whether we are seeing the decoupling in that particular sphere in the world with US and China.
I was just going to say, we're going to also be talking about watches and wonders. Of course, the major trade fair that was on in Geneva, of course, or still on, in fact. A little bit different than probably semiconductors. But what was interesting is I saw this extraordinary table clock, this amazing timepiece, which was sold to someone from Taiwan. I imagine that particular customer probably has something to do with semiconductors as well.
Or TSMC,
you never know.
Yeah.
Also, our Andrew Tuck is joining us this morning. Andrew, are you at Heathrow? Are you at City Airport? Are you already in Milan? Where are you?
No, I'm coming in behind you, Tyler, because I know we're doing a bit of a shuffle in Milan this week. I'm not actually coming till Tuesday. I'm doing the Tuesday to Friday morning shift. I know you're going to be there at the beginning, but I'm beginning to think it's such a changed event this year when I see all the invitations coming in. It started earlier and earlier. I was certainly invited to a lot of things yesterday or already in Milan. So it's strange how the event has mushroomed and expanded, certainly to the weekend before, in a big way.
Andrew, of course, one of the topics and themes, of course, which we'll likely sort of dominate certainly part of our coverage anyway. Of course, we want to be at the Furniture Fair in Milan talking about great industrial design, emerging talent, all of those things. But of course, if you are a French manufacturer, if you're a Polish manufacturer, if indeed you're one of the many Italian manufacturers as well, of course, many people are going to be looking at what these tariffs mean. Will it all be gone by the time you have to put a sofa on an MSC ship to reach Baltimore? When looking sort of ahead, Tuesday onwards from your coverage, what are you keen to hear, Andrew, from the owners, the analysts, the designers that we're going to be bumping into?
Well, Tyler, it's such uncharted territory, isn't it? Because one of the invitations I have accepted is from Jaguar Land Rover, who have just announced this weekend that they'll be pausing shipments of all their cars to the United States during April, while they wait to see what this means for their product. 25% of their revenue comes apparently from the US. A huge hit for the luxury brand owners, for the manufacturers of furniture who sell big in America if they don't have a plant there. Interesting at the weekend, news that LVMH is a bit more sanguine about it because they've already built quite a lot of capacity in the US, so they feel that they will be able to kind of weather this. And so some companies better placed. But yeah, the tariffs are going to reshape the world. Today in the Daily Telegraph, Keir Starmer has written, our Prime Minister has written, saying this is a changed world, essentially saying all bets are off, and we're expecting him to see that that we'll step away from the rigorous targets, for example, for electric vehicles in the coming days, that he will step in to support industries such as steel, such as pharmaceuticals, who are going to be hit by this. So yeah, it's from everybody. But what I hope to hear is a little bit of the resilience I saw when we were in MIPIM for the property event, where people were being hit by the movement of building products and some projects were already being mothballed. I think people have to start making new plans and start thinking, how can they cope with a little bit less exposure to the US? And also, some of the things I think aren't bad questions to ask, which is about where you make things.
Gorana, I want to bring you in on this topic. Are we looking at just a period right now of many negotiations going on behind the scenes? Of course, lots of deals attempting to be cut, etc. Or do we also have many people, many corners of the world, also just sort of sitting there with their arms crossed as well? Already, as Andrew's saying, looking, playing sort of the R card resilience. Say, look at, we don't have a lot of time for this. We have to be out of the world, forging new agreements. What's your take on what is happening across phone lines, Zoom calls, and closed-door sessions around the world right now?
Well, I think that we have to be honest and say that nobody actually has this gamed out, right? There is no one single strategy. I think what underpins all of this is just a huge sense of uncertainty, right? And this is a kind of common denominator to a lot of things that are coming out of Washington these days, where you actually don't know the extent to which this is going to go on, whether, some of the tariffs indeed could be used as leverage, right, as bargaining chips. We talked about this even, in preparation to Donald Trump actually coming into or returning to the White House, that there is just the cloud of uncertainty, and different countries react differently, obviously, depending on where they find themselves in the various supply chains, or if you wish, in the kind of broader food chain of the international system. And what I mean by this is that we already have seen countries that are hit the hardest around Southeast Asia, for instance, making some overtures, right, trying to find a way to negotiate with the Trump administration to come to some sort of agreement. And we can also talk about the kind of the way that some of these tariffs have been imposed and whether it makes sense. And long story short, I would say not really, right? Because again, trade deficits are not necessarily an indicator of who is profiting, but it has to do a lot with the purchasing power of particular countries, right? And their extent of economic development and various other things. But then there are countries that are also saying, no, we might not actually react. We might do something completely different that doesn't doesn't necessarily have to do with the United States per se, but really to diversify, to actually address this sort of issue of resilience for the future, right? If this is an indication of not just where Trump might be, but Trumpism as a movement of the United States really foregoing the idea that there was such a thing, as a Washington consensus. I mean, we saw that with Biden administration already, right? That they were talking about the era of free trade deals being behind us, right? And so where is it that we are moving to? And one particular newsbeat that I've been following is how countries that actually were at odds over negotiating trade liberalization are now seeing, well, we might actually come back to that table and start talking. And one particular story that came up, which is quite interesting, given that it's taking place now in the context of the election campaign in Australia, is the resuscitation of free trade talks between Australia and the European Union, which failed famously back in October of 23. So under the incumbent Albanese government, which is seeking a re-election, now the trade minister in Australia is saying, well, you know what, EU, maybe we are ready to talk, and maybe we are ready to offer some concessions on various, geographical indicators, and we might not call feta Tasmanian feta and so on. So we'll see where that leads. But I would say, again, there is a whole kind of panoply of reactions, and there is no single strategy that's going to work necessarily for all, right? One size doesn't fit all here, and we are just in the early days. So wait and see, I guess.
Florian, I want to come to you very quickly. Andrew, do you want some Tassie feta on your salad over lunch today?
Sounds nice for breakfast even.
Exactly. Florian, you're not quite based in the Detroit of Germany, but listen, you have BMW in Munich, you have Audi, of course, up the Autobahn in Ingolstadt. What's the mood, particularly when we look at, when we think about brand Deutschland, when people think about consuming a premium product, they're often looking at vehicles from Germany. What's the feeling in Bavaria right now?
The feeling in Bavaria is, I think, very split. I think there is two moods in Germany that it's really hard to make up which one is having the upper hand. So there is one mood which is quite doomy and gloomy, which is, a lot of these companies did not go with the innovations that were required. They have kind of, payroll structures that are too expensive. They just didn't really adapt to a changing world, and they were too comfortable making easy profits for a long time. And you combine this with the mood of, political, I would also say instability in the medium run, because you've seen in the recent election, of course, the right-wing party winning, particularly in Eastern Germany. So you see this tension within the country, combined with kind of a lot of economic uncertainty, because a lot of the steps kind of that had to be taken in the past 10 years were not taken. So that's the one side. And the other side is, if you're sitting in a cafe in Munich, then this is a different world, right? Like, you don't get a table in any restaurant. Everything is full and blasting, and everybody's looking for people to hire. So anyways, this is kind of a different world within Germany, but that's fine. But I think for Germany as a whole, there is another feeling or another story. And that's kind of a real recognition of, now we kind of have to overcome our historical role and actually lead. And that creates a lot of confusion, but it also creates a lot of glue, in a sense. So you saw this, when they passed the massive kind of, when they revoked essentially the debt brake and passed, or made the terrain for spending a lot more public money. But you also see this in a lot of different conversations with business, with industry, with academics, that there's a recognition that Europe has to come together now, and Germany will be central in this. And that in itself creates like a very positive energy. So it's really, you have these two kind of streams in parallel at the moment in Germany, I feel.
Andrew, we've been saying in our editorial meetings of late, we don't want a repeat, of course, of Trump 1, where you have 4 years of just one story dominating the news. Part of our responsibility at Monocle as well is also to take people to other corners of the world, which we are going to be doing across the next 42 minutes as well. Andrew, what else is making news in the UK? If we were to go beyond the Telegraph, the Times, even the Daily Mail, if you want, today. I saw that Meghan's jam is getting slammed in the Daily Mail, but maybe we don't want to go there. We want to talk about Tassie Feta instead.
Well, you could talk about the jam all day because that's a perennial issue here, the royal family. And even today, you can open up the newspapers and find stories about Harry, the king, supposedly about how his relationship stays so successful. But I think that the other things which are coming up, there's a lot of defence stories trickling into the newspapers here. Certainly, the Mail is leading on this story, which is that you should pack a bag and be prepared for an attack on our electricity and gas systems by the Russians. So they're saying that everyone should have enough food and a torch and everything to get you through a 72-hour period if everything was switched off in the country. And there's another story in the Daily Telegraph today saying that listening devices have been found in UK waters, which are believed to have been placed by the Russians to listen to the movements of our nuclear submarine fleet. So defence stories, a new nuclear missile that we're apparently building, also making the front pages of the news here. So there's this strange rumbling in the background, despite what's happening in America, that actually we should be looking more east, that there are some stories about defence spending that make the front pages in a way now that wouldn't have even just a few weeks ago.
Gorana, maybe just on this topic, of course, we also hear rumblings right now about, of course, bringing back national service, just, of course, upping budgets to just recruit people. But behind all of that, do we have enough people to actually make weapons? We think about the engineers, we think about people coming out of ETH elsewhere. Are there simply enough people to go and work for Rheinmetall, to go work for Airbus, Safran, all of these companies? Because it's one thing to say, yes, you want to have more forward deployed boots on the ground, but someone has to also make these weapons as well.
Yeah, it's definitely not either or, right? And we now have seen a lot of plans as to where the European defense industrial base should be going, right? This has been one of the hallmarks of the previous and the current von der Leyen EU Commission. So I think in terms of whether we have enough expertise or how we are going to get there, I think a lot of plans have been drawn. I do think that there is a lot, Florian was talking about the car industry, right? There are a lot of talks actually about repurposing some of these supply chains that were part of the automotive industries that will go maybe more towards now potentially defense industry and so on. But this is something that we have to recognize that Europe hasn't been very much focused on since, of course, the end of the Cold War. A lot of knowledge has been lost, not just because Europeans were, enjoying the kind of nice life, but also some of that.
But they were.
But I have to say, and every time I talk about this in the context of transatlantic relations, we have to understand that it takes two to tango, and that actually it was Washington's insistence on a couple of crucial, actually, juncture points, if you wish, or inflection points, where there was the insistence that Europeans don't worry about these tanks, right? Because now the new paradigm was expeditionary warfare, right? What do we need tanks if we are in Afghanistan and we are doing counterinsurgency, right? And we need more nimble and smaller forces, and they need to be supported by different types of weapon systems. There was also a fear that whenever Europeans were talking about any kind of, I don't even want to go into talks about strategic autonomy, but if we want to sort of open that Pandora's box of the different French initiatives, Americans would always say, no, we don't want to duplicate what NATO is doing. We don't want to decouple from this security and so on. So it has, two kind of sides of this coin, or why we are where we are. But the most important thing is that there is a recognition, yes, that this is something that Europeans need to work on. They would have had to work on this, I would say, regardless of who was in the U.S. Current administration, who was in the White House, because, again, the writings have been on the wall for quite a long time about the strategic orientation of the United States. But this time around, it comes also at a kind of moment where the worry is not just that Americans are disinterested in what goes on in Europe, but they are actually acting in a lot of ways as an opponent. And this is a worry, right? That you're not just kind of needing to go without Americans, but also that you will need to deal with a lot of challenges that are coming now, frankly, from both East and the West.
And maybe if we just go east, when you sort of think about all eyes are on one capital, maybe, of course, focusing on Ankara and Istanbul at the moment. I mean, here is a story which is, of course, bubbling on a number of fronts. We can talk about, on one side, weapon sales, and, of course, just the industrial base of Turkey over the last, you could almost say, decade in terms of its growth, shipbuilding, drones, etc. At the same time, of course, a lot of maneuvers beyond Turkey's borders, and then, of course, many domestic problems at home, Florian, as well.
A lot of turmoil, yes. So there is a really nice piece by Elif Shafak in today's Financial Times. So she's the famous novelist, basically about what's going on in Turkey at the moment. Pointing out that Turkey is ranked 165th among 180 countries in terms of media and press freedom. That it has one of the largest prison populations in Europe, and at the same time, you see these protests erupting in 55 of 81 provinces. So it's not just an Istanbul thing. So you see kind of people rising across Turkey, and it's really the young people and a lot of women as well. So and part of what that shows, and I think that's the interesting bridge to some of the topics we've discussed in Europe as well, is there is kind of one question of whether political leaders manage, at the moment in Europe, for example, to get together sensibly and to purchase, defense together and to get their industries together, because then I think the capabilities are there. I'm not too worried. I'm worried about coordination, right? But if they get coordination right, I think that's okay. But then the other thing is, like, how connected are these political elites to the populations? Is it really the question of whether you find a deal with Erdogan now, or how many of these people in power are actually, and also in Europe, are so far from their realities on the ground that actually people are really protesting and going to the streets, and it's really unclear, what the next regime will look like. And so I think Turkey is really, in some sense, reminding me a little bit of kind of the Hong Kong protests. These kind of, you see it coming out of universities, you see it's a lot of young people, it's a lot of kind of demands for actual freedom. In Turkey, it's combined with economic downturn, which is a very different kind of brew. But in the demands of the people, it's very similar. And also in the responses of the regime, it's in a sense similar. So just brutal force, putting people in prison. So I really hope that we'll see, that struggle in Turkey end differently than in Hong Kong. And I think it just adds to this uncertainty that we're seeing, like nothing is very permanent at the moment. Like it can flip either direction very fast.
Andrew, just before we go, and we're approaching the bottom of the hour, maybe and sort of almost moving into all things sort of trade fair related. Before you get to Milan, we did something unusual. Normally, we turn around a magazine in about a month's time. But I guess for lucky people in Lombardia today, they're going to be getting a very advanced issue of our May edition. Why did this come about?
Well, look, the event is super important to us and our audience, so we want to be present in the city in a big way. So we've done two things. We have the usual Salone special newspaper that we bring out at this time, and that will be hitting news kiosks and be available across the city and as you say, throughout Lombardy. But also, we brought forward the production deadlines for the new issue, and that has our design awards in it, pulled together by our design editor Nick Manise, and he's done a great job. And that will also now be on news kiosks as well. So we're hosting a couple of events, one of which is for the Design Awards in partnership with Cupra, who have been our supporter in this project. So it's an important moment for us. We want to be present in the city in a big way. We have a big team there, yourself included, over the coming days. Sophie Grove is heading there today. So yes, a big team covering everything that we're doing. And important that we're there and present and being part of all these conversations that we've already touched on today. That because furniture, it doesn't happen in isolation. It's about urbanism. It's about the sizes of apartments. It's about property. It's about economics. So it's important for us to be inserted in that conversation.
And Andrew, just to quickly maybe share with our listeners as well, another editorial project that has been keeping not just you, but certainly people in London. In fact, all points where we have, of course, correspondents and staff around the world, which, should be sort of heading to screens shortly.
So if
Deep
anyone
breath,
tells you everyone tells you building a website is easy, ignore them. No, we've been rebuilding Monocle.com to make it a place where print is always going to be first, and there's no change of narrative or a different business model coming to the fore. But what we do want to do is, when you come to .com, to look after you better. So over the years, so many things have been added to that website, and now we want to bring back some simplicity, to do some good storytelling digitally, but also bring to the fore a lot of the reporting we're already doing that just doesn't shine through in the current way we have .com. So we're almost there. But there is complexities to do with it being an e-com site, to do with currency conversions. So it's not the storytelling that's holding us up so much at the moment. But we believe within the next 2 weeks maximum that there will be a new Monocle.com experience, and that's for mobile. That's how we deliver you information about travel. And some exciting things happening, especially around travel and how we'll engage with people and become the place that you really need to check out before you head to any city.
Andrew Tuck, speaking of heading to cities, hopefully we'll cross over at Linate or Malpensa on Tuesday morning. That was our editor-in-chief, Andrew Tuck. Emma Nelson is back in London as well with our news headlines.
Thank you very much indeed, Tyler. Israel's army has admitted its soldiers made mistakes over the killing of 15 emergency workers in southern Gaza. A video emerged which contradicted Israel's account of the attack. It had said vehicles in the convoy, including ambulances, approached suspiciously and with their lights on. But in the footage, the vehicles were clearly signposted with the lights on. Donald Trump's closest ally, Elon Musk, has reportedly spoken out against the new tariff system launched by the president last week. In an online call with Italy's League Party, Mr. Musk said he'd like to establish a free trade zone between Europe and the US. Nearly 5,000 guests have helped a Swiss town break the record of the world's biggest raclette. Having had the title snatched away from them by the French last year, the town of Martigny welcomed 4,893 diners yesterday evening. A total of 2,000 kilos of cheese was eaten, plus 1,200 kilos of potatoes and 1,012 jars of cornichons and onions. And a super colony of invasive ants is causing severe delays to major expansion projects by the Swiss railway. Millions of Tapinoma ants have set up home in an area the size of 10 football fields in Winterthur. They're crawling precisely where the SBB wants to build a 3 billion Swiss franc multi-track railway. And those are the headlines. Back to you, Tyler, in Switzerland.
Emma, Florian's looking a bit puzzled. Now he's wondering if that's the delay problem, because, St. Gallen and Winter, not that far apart. Maybe it was the ants that were causing the problem.
Maybe, yeah.
Right?
I mean, so many potential reasons, we could fill a program.
Emma Nelson, tell me, is our Brenda Tuohy, our luxury market editor, she in close proximity in Studio One in London this morning?
She's within touching distance, Tyler.
Very, very good to hear. Brenda, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. You've been down, of course, at Watches and Wonders in Geneva. This has really become the most important trade fair. It's B2B. Over the weekend, it turns to being a B2C event as well. And it brings together most of the great and the good of the watch industry. There's a couple of course, big players who sort of remain outside of it as well. Maybe just set the scene for us when we look at the state of the industry. What were you hearing? What was the mood? Because, of course, this came at a time when Switzerland, of course, will be slapped with tariffs north of 30%, 31%. What were you hearing, or generally, how was the mood over the past few days?
I think that the mood was buoyant, but perhaps as a result of these uncertain times that we're living in, there were two main trends that I saw. And the first one was blue, the calming color blue. And the second one was vintage, looking back, nostalgia. So blue was presented by Audemars Piguet. They had worked on creating the legendary blue color that Gerald Genta had created in 1972, and they presented the Bleu Nuit Nuage 50. Chanel also presented a blue in a matte ceramic studded with sapphires in exactly the same shade. And Zenith, who love blue, had their ultramarine color of blue, and that was very dynamic and well received too.
So, Brenda, it was interesting when you mentioned sort of, as we know, it's a multipolar world. As much as sort of Florian was saying, yes, there are problems in Germany, but of course you can't get a table at a restaurant. Everything's packed. It just sort of feels like it's Oktoberfest every day of the week. Likewise, of course, when you're at the PAL Expo in Geneva as well, right? I mean, there is this. I mean, of course, there's all the sort of the watch hounds are so excited, of course, to be there. But I think a real sense of also, I was there Friday and visiting a couple of stands. And it's remarkable, of course, to see the level of spend and maybe sort of people wanting to get out spending now rather than 3 months from now.
I mean, the presentation is really quite incredible. Van Cleef and Arpels and Cartier, to name two, Piaget also. The stands are so exquisite. I can't imagine what they cost. To bring there, to build, to bring all of their staff over. And then PAL Expo has such a wonderful hospitality section. I mean, there are sections all over the place. You never need to leave, basically. You could drink champagne all day if you wanted. They had the finest prawns. I mean, delicious, delicious breakfast, lunches, and probably even, late afternoon tea. So they really want to keep you there. You never, ever need to go. They have a shuttle service that connects you from the hotels all over Geneva and brings you to PAL Expo and will pick you up again and take you back. So it's fantastic. And there are thousands of people there looking at watches all day long. I mean, I myself, I had half-hour appointments kind of back-to-back all day long. Fascinating. I mean, Piaget were looking really nostalgic. They had rejigged their black tie watch, which was a favorite of Andy Warhol. Apparently, he had 7. And they renamed it the Andy Warhol. They had sliced hard stones, a gadroon-shaped bezel, malachite, tiger's eye, lapis. That was a really fabulous-looking watch, both for a man or a woman.
Gorana's getting very excited here. She wants visuals as well. Brenda, just quickly, I want to know, because I want to bring Chris in from Gitman Vintage, who's with us in studio today. But just when you sort of go down that sort of nostalgia side, it was interesting being at Gran Seiko, for example. Gran Seiko had this really just amazing lineup of watches, through the ages. And at first, when you walk in, I'm almost sort of thinking whether they had some type of camera in place to see where are people drawn to, because it almost seemed like sort of a live focus group, like where are people drawn to, and then which one should they re-edition?
There's a lot of that around. I mean, Cartier had brought back earlier editions, some from the 1920s and the 1940s. Gégé Lecoultre, the same. They had a fantastic watch, their Reverso, that had an enameled and jeweled back. They had 2 different versions. One was presented with flowers, and the other sort of an Art Deco cubism kind of a back, which was fantastic, as was the first sporting watch, first launched in 1935, and big amongst polo players originally. Chanel, too, had a wonderful lion theme, Gabrielle Chanel's favorite animal, and they presented 5 pieces. They were one-offs, 3 necklaces and 2 rings. They were just fantastic. I mean, the level of craftsmanship there was breathtaking, fabulous.
Brenda, just I want to bring in Chris Olberding. Chris, for many of our listeners and maybe consumers as well, will know him, of course, as the man behind Gitman Vintage, probably the finest button-down Oxford shirts in the world, maybe up for debate as well. He's passing through Zurich at the moment. Chris, I just in the same way that we're sort of reading the temperature for a key part of the luxury goods industry, which is watches. How is it in menswear? You have in a way a global base. But what's amazing about your business, you are made in the USA. So were you sort of doing backflips and cartwheels, thinking, these are fantastic days for Gitman Vintage because you have your base there, and of course, the US is a big market for you. But also at the same time, you're here in Zurich. You did a trunk show next door, taking special orders yesterday. You're sort of pinballing around the world doing this all the time. What's your take on the state of menswear and where we stand right now? Of course, given uncertain times, but also we're talking about premium products that hopefully last a lifetime. So do you feel a bit bulletproof?
Yeah, well, definitely not bulletproof. We're a small manufacturer. We're one of the oldest continuous American-made shirt makers. Been around since 1932. The vintage brand, 17 years. So we've been through a lot. We've seen a lot. Right now we are pivoting in terms of tariffs and where we're getting our fabric from, concentrating on a fully made in USA shirt, so sourcing cotton in the Carolinas and having it woven in Georgia, and strong partnerships with our very strong independent retailers. And I feel like it's more of the relationship and the partnership that is kind of driving it, and working with them and being very open about communication, the changes as far as you can get in advance of them, and share that with your retail partners. But one thing I noticed spending the last few days here in Zurich and working with a lot of repeat customers, there's just a lot of celebration of the brand, celebration of independent retailers, of smaller brands, and people really valuing that. And I see that as a strength going forward. Not sure what the future holds. Every day it seems a little bit more volatile, but we're small and nimble, and we're able to pivot quickly. So it's a pleasure being here and still being able to travel internationally. And I think it's very important to also be here and visiting our stores.
Well, one of the challenges people talk about is, of course, we're in this world, and Brenda, you can jump in as well if you want. The sort of, the mono brands, where of course it's sort of singular. It's all the companies we know about. And for someone like you, if I look at your stockist, you're working with multi-brand stores. You need to have, of course, shops which are selling the best from Japan, the best from Italy, that there's this sort of real sense of discovery. But in many ways, those stores are also disappearing. You could say department stores are practically gone in North America. Great that some new things are maybe happening in Europe. Would you say that's one of the central challenges for you, that sense of just exploration? Great having repeat customers, but also you need to be opening up new markets as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there are retail spaces that new stores are opening. And there's a very interesting kind of pattern of, from after 2008, a lot of our stores are celebrating 10, 15-year anniversaries. And they're continuing to open up new spaces, particularly in the U.S., but it is definitely happening in Europe as well. The Asian market for us was quite large and robust, Japan in particular. South Korea's kind of replaced that, but as we know, going to Japan, the yen right now versus the dollar is very challenging. But there is a certain amount of, I think, positivity happening, and you just have to keep concentrating on that.
Chris Olding from Gitman Vintage. Thanks, Reg. Brenda, we're going to have to leave it there as well. Our Brenda Tuohy, of course, our luxury market editor, with a report from Geneva. Just maybe, Gorana, just very quickly, from your side, when you hear about this and what's happening, of course, all markets here, we're talking about something a little bit different than, of course, the weapons space. We're talking about the luxury goods business as well. Do you see it? We've always sort of talked there'll be sort of a certain level of resilience. Do you also think that we're going to see sort of, spending patterns as well? There are going to be maybe not winners out of this, but of course there are going to be pockets of new alliances, etc. That will occur. Wealth is going to be, you could also say as well. Look at, if you suddenly have pockets of Germany, when a little bit earlier, Florian, you were talking about that sense of glue. Of course, you're going to have Mittelstand companies that are going to do well right now, and let's say whatever the Mittelstand equivalent of France is, and Spain too. And is this also sort of, should we not forget these things in a way, despite all of this uncertainty too?
Yeah, that's certainly a great question. And again, we'll see how some of these stories develop, but I wouldn't underestimate the level that some of these trade wars are going to spill over on just consumer sentiments and sort of perceptions of the kind of coolness of particular brands, which might be associated with particular countries. I think we are seeing that already. Right? We talked about, Tesla going down these days, because of particular decisions or alignments that its owner has taken. But I would also see that maybe in this kind of new world, there might be the return of the kind of coolness of buying. I mean, we've seen that for quite some time, right? That there are advocates for various reasons to go back to kind of local sourcing, right? Whether it comes to clothes or food, wherever you want. But I think also maybe now some of these things, purely from the political kind of fighting that we see, spill over onto consumer choices. And this might actually then create winners locally, rather than, again, going more for, whatever is whatever is cheapest or most convenient in that sense.
Indeed. It's just gone about 10:40. 3 here in Zurich. We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, though, we're going to be talking to John Lee, Senior Fellow at the Asia Society, and discussing the Oxford debate in Zurich that's coming up, hosted by the Asia Society. Stay with us.
Do you want the tactility of print and the speed of digital? Well, sign up for a Monocle subscription today and enjoy 10 issues plus 4 annual specials, as well as access to the Monocle digital editions. The Monocle Digital Editions offers improved access to the magazine on the go and at the touch of a button. It also includes our extensive archive of global reporting and a growing roster of travel guides and tips too. Head to monocle.com/subscribe to sign up now.
And you're back with Monocle on Sunday with me, Tyler Brûlé. Now, it's a little bit of a question. Is China just catching up, or is it ready to lead the world on the topic of innovation? Clearly, much to be unpacked there. It's a big question, which, of course, is going to be tackled at tomorrow's Oxford debate in Zurich, which is hosted by the Asia Society of Switzerland. John Lee, Senior Fellow at Asia Society Switzerland, is one of the voices who's going to be taking part. Many, and good morning, by the way. Welcome. Good to see you.
Good morning. Glad to be here in sunny Zurich.
Yes. So tell me, I mean, many would argue, though, if you spend a bit of time in Shenzhen, where everything is completely digitized and everything is Alipay, and you sort of takes your breath away when you're in an emerging Chinese city. You think, wow, they're already sort of way ahead, and of course you've got the likes of BYD on your doorstep. Is it going to be a bit of a one-sided debate and discussion, or let's say, what side are you representing, for or against on this?
Arguing for in this case, so I won't deny that probably it's an easier argument, certainly now than it was even a month ago. I think that has a lot to do with events coming from the United States rather than from China.
And when we look at this, because we can look at, let's say, innovation, pure technical side, but also we know that innovation also needs culture, it needs discussion, it needs debate, it needs a level of openness. Again, we can sort of argue what direction many, let's say, liberal democracies are moving in at the moment. But when you think about what's going to, let's say, play out tomorrow, what are the themes and topics that you believe need to be unpacked within this?
Well, you already alluded to culture, so I think that it'll be very interesting to see, particularly from our opposition, what the arguments are brought to bear regarding the different aspects of innovative culture in China compared to our stereotypes of what is necessary for innovation in Western countries. But as I mentioned, also what's happening in a comparative sense, because it's always a competition, and right now the United States seems to be bent on shooting itself in the foot in the national or international innovation competition. And then, of course, where Europe fits into this, and Switzerland included, is also going to be quite interesting.
It's interesting. I feel right now that also China's doing a very good job of course, let's say, attracting conversation, discussion. If anyone read Thomas Friedman in the New York Times yesterday, he really talks about also being out in Beijing last week. His reflections, of course, on China's, of course, feeling about what the U.S. is doing. Florian, I just want to bring you in because you were interesting on the topic of sort of the German, of course, message around things. We also sort of know right now in Germany as well, maybe on the shooting oneself in the foot topic, the whole issue, of course, Chinese vehicles coming into the market, etc., and that sort of feeling. There's been a variety of stories this week. Do we also see suddenly actually maybe a jump from Berlin back to Beijing? I mean, Gorana, maybe a view on this as well. Brussels, back to Beijing. What's your take on it, Florian? I'll start with you.
I think Germany is confused in this. So Volkswagen was the first major car company that went to China, right? So they used to be, in the early days, extremely open towards China. And the experience of the industrial base in Germany has been one of extraordinary profit, being enabled by going to China first, and two, loss of entire IP. So basically, it's kind of a split thing. So they made a lot of money with it, but they lost a lot of kind of their technological advantage by going pretty blindly into these corporations. So I think at the moment, if you look at it, it's really the focus of the energy is on getting things together in Europe and on forming, alliances in Europe, both kind of market-wise, defense-wise, and also in politics. And I think that sentiment is very strong. And I think the next step will be to think about, outwards, and whether, the negotiations with Australia, as Gorana has mentioned, or, whether, there's going to be more kind of outreach towards Beijing. But I think that's kind of on the back burner. I think first is kind of like what is going to happen in Europe and how do we tie this together?
John, just from your side, you talk about sort of alliances, Florian. Of course, so many neighbors of China. Of course, Japan has a massive manufacturing base. As do the Koreans. So many people, of course, are manufacturing in China. But you've also sort of seen sort of a situation, of course, where China is trying to, of course, build its own white goods brands, take them global, challenge the likes of Samsung. Whether we look at mobile phones, so all of these things, China, of course, trying to build up its own super brands. Yeah, sometimes, with some success in markets, one could argue, have we seen sort of any sort of Chinese brands go properly global yet? We could maybe go to Shenzhen, maybe saying, BYD is that company. Is there still alliance building, though? Do you see China playing a role as well to try to bring everybody together and play, let's say, a different role in the region? Or is it sort of much more of a unilateral, headlong, let Beijing lead the way and also leave everyone else in the wake?
I think it's going to vary between regions. So one of the first reactions that we saw to the announcement of the Rose Garden this week was the resumption of negotiations between, since you mentioned them, South Korea and Japan and China on a free trade agreement, which has been going on for half a decade now. But I think that's well in line with the trend towards regionalization, particularly if you're talking about manufacturing. A lot of that has concentrated in Asia over the past 10, 15 years. Already the industry is well developed there, but in particular, the integration of regional markets and supply chains has already been well progressing towards, you could think of it as an Asian regional bloc, and similar trends have been observed in North America. Here in Europe, of course, statistic that you hear thrown around quite a lot these days is that at least when it comes to exports, the EU exports to Switzerland as much as it does to China, and a lot of that has to do with geographical proximity and the synergies that you get from that co-location and also cultural exchange. So when it comes to Europe, I think that, again, there's a lot of reevaluation that's going on at the moment in terms of the positioning vis-a-vis Beijing. The priorities between the different capitals are obviously not the same. But at the same time, because China is the center of manufacturing for so many industries these days, or at least an indispensable link in the chain, and increasingly an important consumer market, although the extent to which that will be accessible to foreign companies is one of the key issues when striking that balance in terms of the trading relationship with China. It's very difficult for European players to ignore. And here, of course, we're not just talking about the big German car companies, but really about everyone. And once again, it's a relative issue where the question is, well, even if people would prefer to do business with the United States, if you're not being given that option, at least not on favorable terms, then there are only so many places that you can turn.
John Lee, Senior Fellow at the Asia Society. We have to leave it there. Of course, we're going to be following up and, of course, listening to what happens in the debate tomorrow. You are listening to Monocle on Sunday. It's 10:51. We're going away for another just a quick break. When we come back, we're heading to Tokyo.
Monocle's leadership conference, The Chiefs, is coming to Jakarta this month. On the 23rd and 24th at 25 Hours Hotel The Oddbird, the Chiefs will bring together leaders in marketing, branding, government and hospitality. Leaders like seasoned news anchor and founder of Narasi, Najwa Shihab. One of the key figures in shaping Indonesia's retail scene, Cynthia Wiryono. And the co-founder of Show Architects, Daliana Suryawanata. There's not long left to get your ticket, so be sure to join Monocle's editorial director Tyler Brûlé, editor-in-chief Andrew Tuck, and our editors from across Asia and beyond. Tickets are still available now at monocle.com/events, or drop a line to Hannah Grundy on hg@monocle.com and find out more. The Chiefs Global Leadership Conference in Jakarta. See you there.
It has just gone 10:52 here in Zurich. A little bit of a tricky transition on the program because last week we lost one of our correspondents, Gwen Robinson, a very famous voice, our Bangkok correspondent, someone you heard on this show many, many times. I want to bring in Fiona Wilson, of course, a very good friend of Gwen's. Also, Andrew Tuck is there this morning. Fiona in Tokyo, good afternoon.
Hi, Tyler.
It's been one of those weeks, something, I guess, personally, of course, following this. And Yeah, I mean, in the sort of span of 18 years of doing this this business, it's the first time we've actually lost one of our correspondents. Maybe just Fiona, maybe from your side, very difficult to talk about, but I guess sort of thoughts and reflections on Gwen and maybe sort of how she came into our orbit and just the celebration that I think that happened around her this week in Bangkok was amazing to see the journalists, the diplomatic community, the role that she played, not just in Southeast Asia, but also within Japan as well.
Yeah, that's so right, Tyler. I mean, Gwen, a very, very good friend to me for 25 years, always counted on her. She was Japanese-Australian. She had friends all over Asia, as you said. She'd worked all over Asia. She seemed to know everybody. She'd worked for a number of publications, and she always stayed friends with people. And if you ever needed a helping hand, Gwen was the first person to turn to. She loved helping people. She loved bringing everyone gifts. She was always up for a late night drink, as you know. But professionally, obviously brilliant. She was very, very good on all sorts of subjects. Myanmar was her big passion, I suppose, in recent years. But, her network spread around Asia. And you're absolutely right. This outpouring after her death, which was unexpected. She had been unwell for a while, on and off, but we didn't really know that it was going to come so soon. And we'd seen her quite recently. And, just the last few weeks, there's been the most extraordinary WhatsApp group popped up of her great friends. And, it's been lovely to share stories about her, and everyone's got a story about Gwen, in fact, about 100 stories. She helped us at Monocle a lot, and she was always there as a great voice on Thailand and beyond.
Andrew, just bringing you back as well, maybe you could... somehow paint a bit of a picture, because Gwen is really, I would say, sort of one of a kind, because she represents a bit of an end of an era, maybe the type of woman that many of us sort of grew up with in newsrooms in London and elsewhere around the world.
Well, first of all, Tyler, just hearing that promotion for the Chiefs, what's interesting is that many of these places were put on our radar because of Gwen. So, I think it was back in 2018, Gwen went to interview the president of Indonesia, Joko Widodo at the time. And amazing, she brought that story into our world. And you talked about Burma, is in the news today. But again, when you think of all the stories that she did almost a decade ago now, trying to encourage people to think about Burma in a different way, she made contacts in Yangon who remain friends of the brand to this day. So she stitched us into all sorts of environments and worlds and countries. But a firecracker, a nice, straight-talking, tough individual who'd got through newsrooms and stories and had come out to tell the tale. She, and as Fiona said, we would. I think one of my first memories is with being her at the Foreign Correspondents Club in Hong Kong, where she was holding court, knew everybody, just fun to be around within those moments. Because, as you say, the world of journalism has changed so much, and we get so used to people being reporters or correspondents, but actually having no history of it, or just being more kind of on the influencer side. But here was someone who was like deeply rooted in journalism, had fought hard to get where she was in the world, and just had this knowledge of places that whenever you asked her about it, she could tell you a bit of intrigue about Thailand, about Japan. She always had the gossip.
And Andrew, just on that, I just want to play a bit of classic Gwen, and this was just Gwen's reflection a little bit on those famous pictures, of course, of the current king getting off an aircraft, King of Thailand, it is, we believe in Bavaria, when he was in a bit of a crop top. Let's hear what Gwen had to say.
It was very clear that some of them were done for poking fun and wearing those crop tops. So, yes, it's kind of, it's seen as a very political statement in Thailand to wear one. So, of course, I've thrown them all out of my wardrobe. We were hoping to see you in yours if you could make it here. And I can assure you that if you choose the right area of Thailand, you can still come. Just be careful of showing your midriff.
The voice of Gwen Robinson there, sadly, will be missed. And as we sort of said, one of a kind. Andrew, you'll be joining us, of course, in Jakarta Gwen was supposed to be joining us as well. Fiona, you'll also be there as well. Fiona, just quickly, maybe sort of you talked about those moments, and I would just say as well, probably one of the best voices for radio. Even though she didn't sort of set out, she was always a woman of print, but an unmistakable voice on the microphone.
Yeah, I mean, she was just so distinctive. And I think also just hearing that voice, it's quite emotional to hear that voice, because it's such a personal loss as well. But I think, when you hear the way she talked about all these stories, she always brought her distinctive humour, her rather wry humour onto all these subjects. And, she did know all the backstories. And she was a woman who was amazingly both public and private, which is something her brother, Mark, who's done an amazing job over the last couple of weeks, to keep everyone together, to inform everyone of what's been going on. And he mentioned that Gwen had these sides to her. She could be a very public figure, but immensely private. You could trust her with the stories. So I'm sure that's why so many people told her their best scoops.
Fiona Wilson, we're going to have to leave it there. That's all for this edition of Monocle on Sunday. Goodbye.